Hi, it's Jane here, back with another video for Wow Embossing Powder. And today I've got two projects to share with you, so let's get stuck in. Today I'm going to be using the new Dappled Pearl Effect Trio, and just look at these colours, they're absolutely gorgeous. Really teal, aqua, seaside vibes. So we've got three colours here, the Newport, which is the kind of greeny colour, the Oceanside, which is the paler of the two teals, and Laguna. So you can see I've swatched them all out there and they really are stunning, right up my street. So the first thing that they reminded me of is the ocean. So that's the kind of theme that I've gone for with my cards today. So I'm starting off with this stencil from Heffy Doodle, which is called the Wave to Me stencil. And I've popped that down onto some white cardstock and secured it down with some magnets so it doesn't shift when I'm inking it up. And I'm just pouncing my Wow Embossing ink pad over the top, pressing it downwards as opposed to rubbing it across to make sure that that stencil doesn't shift. So now that I've covered the entire background, I'm just going to apply my embossing powders. So I'm starting with the Newport here and I'm just popping it on in not random, but just popping it on in different patches across the panel. And then I'm going to add the other two colours on after that. So anything that I don't use, I'm just popping back into my jar to save for another project. So I'm coming in with the Laguna next. I'm filling in some of those patches. So by the end of it, I'm going to have covered the entire panel. So again, just tapping off any excess. And then I'm going to add my third colour, which is the Oceanside. So I've got the whole panel covered there. So now I'm just going to heat set it with my heat tool, and I've put that on the second setting, which is the hottest. You want to get your heat tool nice and hot before you start to do the heat embossing so that it melts quickly. And that just helps to avoid things like warping. So originally I had thought about doing the full background as this heat emboss panel, but actually I decided that I wanted to trim it down and just create a strip that I could put onto a white card blank to create a focal point with the heat embossing. I do like a lot of white space on a card and I like clean and simple cards, so that's the look that I'm going for now, and I'm going to have the other elements of my card centered around that focal point. So I'm using this absolutely adorable stamp set from the greeting farm called Little Mermaids, and right now I'm just taking the stamps off the sheet and I'm arranging them on my card just to make sure that they are in the layout that I want. One little tip that I'd have for you is when you've got the layout that you'd like on a card, take a quick photo of it with your phone, because then if you have to remove the elements like I'm doing here to stamp them and colour them, it'll help you remember exactly where everything was when you come to finish your card later on. So I'm just using my mini Misty here and I'm stamping them onto a sheet of Nina Classic Crest Solar White card, which I wouldn't usually use for colouring actually, because I find that sometimes you can get a little bit of wicking where the colour starts to seep outside of the lines a little bit. I usually use a different type of card called Transitotype Perfect Colouring Paper, which is brilliant for alcohol markers. But on this occasion, because I'd used the Nina as my white card background, I wanted to make sure that the card that I used for my images matched up exactly so I didn't have two clashing whites. So I've just stamped my images out there with some alcohol marker friendly black ink. So the one that I've used is MFT Stamps Extreme Black. I've also used that to stamp the sentiments on my card ready for later. So now I'm just colouring in the images with my Copic markers, and I'll have all of the colours listed below if you don't catch them on the screen just now. I'm using colours that coordinate with the trio, and I'm actually using a limited colour palette, so that's another little tip that I'd give you for Copic marker colouring or any colouring really, is that you don't feel like you have to use every colour under the sun. So I'm using the same teals on both mermaids, the same purples every time I use a purple, the same greens, and it just helps the whole image to coordinate. Because I find that if you use too many teal combinations or too many different types of purples, for example, you could end up with quite a lot of clashing colour in there. So I find sticking to the same colour combinations throughout your whole card can work quite well. So obviously I've sped up the colouring here because today obviously I was focusing more on the embossing powders than the colouring. But if you do want to see some more colouring videos or some more information about that, please feel free to hop over to my YouTube channel where I've got some more colouring videos on there. If you're new to colouring, what I'm doing here is using 3 shades of the same colour for most elements. So I'll have a darker tone, a mid-tone and a lighter tone. Generally speaking, I start with the darker tone and then I will blend the mid-tone into that, so basically overlap a little bit. Then I'll move into the lighter tone, so blend the lighter tone into the mid-tone and go over that a couple of times until you're happy with the blend that you get. And one other thing that you can do to really elevate your colouring as well is to finish it off with some highlights. So I like to use a white gel pen. This is my favourite here. It's the Jelly Roll number 8. So this one produces a slightly thicker line than some of the other finer pens, but I really like that. And I also find that it doesn't clog up like some of the other white gel pens that you can get. So I tend to do 1 longer line followed by 2 shorter lines and just pop those into the darkest areas where you'd have the most shadow. So now that my colouring is finished, I have off screen popped my images onto my brother's Scan and Cut, and that's done all the hard work for me, so I don't have to fussy cut them. And now I can just add them to my card. So I'm trying to remember where I laid them out before. I should have followed my own tip about taking a photo on my camera. And I am going to pop these up so they're a little bit elevated by using some of these 3D foam squares. I'm using a mix of the bigger squares and the smaller squares to get into every area of my images, just to make sure that they don't get all squashed down when they get sent in the post. So I'm just taking the backing off of these and popping that mermaid up, and off screen I've done the same with all of my other elements. So the last thing to do now is to pop my card panel onto a card base using my favourite tape runner. So that finishes up my first project, and I'm really glad that I decided just to do that focal strip down one side, because I think it grounds all of those other elements on the card, and I think it's come together really nicely. Plus it leaves us a bit of that embossed background to use on another project. So waste not, want not, I've decided to make a matching shaker tag. So I've got my shaker tag dies from Heffy Doodle. Absolutely love these. I'm just making sure that there's enough of that background to fill the whole window. And I have die cut the front piece and the back piece of the tag from, again, some Nina Classic Crest card, because that comes in a £110 weight, so it's nice and sturdy. And then I'm just trimming down a piece of acetate to be the right size to fit onto the back of that front panel. I'm securing it in place with some liquid glue just around the edges. And then I can start to construct my shaker. So I'm using these thin foam strips, which are brilliant because they are nice and thin, so they can just fit neatly around the edges there. But they're also quite tall, so it leaves a lot of space for your shaker filling to move about. So I really, really like these. So I'm going to make sure to cover the whole of the back of that panel in the foam strips. Again, just to make sure that there's no sagging anywhere on the tag. And then I'm going to glue my heat embossed panel to the back of the shaker tag. So this is the bit that you can see through the window. So just making sure that all fits nicely, and I'm going to pop it in place with some tape runner again. So the next thing I'm going to do is just, again, another little hint. is to pop some anti-static powder around the edges of the foam strips, and that just takes away some of that stickiness, and it'll stop your shaker filling from sticking to the edges of your shaker. So I'm just filling it up now with some of these cotton candy sparkles from Wow Embossing, which are really, really beautiful. Honestly, don't tell anybody I told you this, but I wasn't a huge fan of glitter until I started working with Wow, and they've got such a gorgeous range in the sparkles collection that I'm definitely a convert. So I'm just peeling off the release paper from the foam strips there, and I'm going to place the back of the tag onto the foam strips with the pattern side facing down, so that when you flip it over you can see it through the window. So off camera I have stamped, coloured and fussy cut another one of the mermaids from the same set and a coordinating sentiment. So I'm just going to pop these on to my shaker tag with some liquid glue, because as obsessed as I am with dimension, I think there probably is already enough of it in the tag already. So I'm just going to stick these down, and then I'm going to grab some black and white twine and I'm going to use that to complete my tag. So that completes my 2 projects today, a nice little 2 for 1. So I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial. If you've got any questions or comments, please leave them below. I'd love to hear from you. And I'll be back again soon with another episode of Exploring Embossing. Thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.